One of France's biggest streamers has died after live streaming for nearly 300 hours straight. Jean Pormanov, a 46-year-old kick streamer, died on camera in August of 2025 after a staggering 298-hour live stream filled with months of escalating abuse. Known online for bizarre endurance streams, he became the target of cruel content orchestrated by his co-hosts and egged on by donations. Slapped, strangled, suffocated with plastic bags, shocked with electricity, mocked in humiliating costumes, and deprived of sleep. Shortly before his death, he wrote to his mother, "I feel like I'm kidnapped. I want to get out of here, but the other guy won't let me. He's keeping me locked in." Just days later, he died in his sleep during the marathon stream. French prosecutors are now investigating his collaborators for deliberate violence and exploitation, while Kick, the platform hosting the stream, faces global outrage for failing to stop it. What viewers thought was twisted entertainment turned out to be the slow public destruction of a man. In 1992, 31-year-old Mexican singer Chelino Sanchez took the stage at a packed concert in Culiacan, Mexico. Known for his ballads about the drug trade and the lives of narcos, Chelino was no stranger to danger. In the middle of a song, a man from the crowd approached the stage and handed him a small folded note as cameras captured the moment. Chelino paused, read the note carefully, and gave a slight nod before continuing his performance, but now with a visible tension in his voice and eyes. Hours later, after leaving the venue, Chelino and his entourage were stopped by armed men posing as police. He was abducted, and hours later his body was found on a remote dirt road. His wrists had been bound, and he was shot and killed execution style. To this day, no one knows exactly what was written on that piece of paper, but many believe it was a final death threat from someone who intended to make sure Chelino's voice was silenced forever. 300 years, the office of the Pope was almost certainly a death sentence. It's said that 28 out of the first 31 popes were murdered, many in violent ways. For example, ancient Roman authorities executed Saint Clement I by attaching an anchor to his neck and dropping him into the Black Sea. He would eventually become the patron saint of mariners. Tradition holds that an angry mob killed Pope Saint Calixtus by throwing him down a well. The well is still preserved at the Church of Santa Maria in Rome. Saint Sixtus II was celebrating Mass in the catacombs of San Callisto when Roman soldiers suddenly stormed in. The Pope was then decapitated along with 4 of his deacons right in front of his congregation. Pope Saint Pontian died of forced labor in mines after being exiled to Sardinia. He resigned the papacy, the first pope to do so, knowing there was no chance for him to return alive. It's widely rumored that Pope Paul II died of a heart attack in 1471 while being sodomized by a page boy. Legend has it that Pope Adrian IV, the only English pope in history, died after choking on a fly that flew into his mouth while he was drinking wine. On his deathbed in 1492, Innocent VIII's doctors reportedly tried to revive him by transfusing blood from 3 young boys. All 3 children reportedly died from the experiment, and the Pope died shortly afterwards. It's often cited as one of the first recorded and failed blood transfusions. Pope Saint Clement II died suddenly in 1047, just 1 year into his reign. Nearly 1,000 years later, in 1959, a medical exam of his body revealed dangerously high levels of lead, suggesting he was actually poisoned. And last but not least, considered by many to have been the worst pope in history, the reign of Pope John XII involved gambling with church funds, ordaining a child bishop, and allegedly toasting to the devil. It's widely believed that he either died of a stroke while having sex with a married woman or was beaten to death by her husband. In 2021, YouTube prankster Timothy Wilkes had approached a group of strangers in a Nashville parking lot while carrying a butcher knife. He was apparently staging a fake robbery to see how people would react, but was almost immediately shot and killed by David Starnes Jr., who said he was unaware that he was being pranked and fired in self-defense. No one was charged. In 2012, Montana man Randy Lee Tenley was trying to spark reported sightings of Bigfoot by dressing up in a ghillie suit and standing in the middle of a highway. He tragically ended up being struck by 2 different cars and was pronounced dead at the scene. In 1996, the captain and flight engineer of a Colombian cargo flight decided to prank their novice first officer by giving him control of the plane after shutting off 2 engines. The plane stalled immediately after takeoff and crashed into a neighborhood, killing 22 people, including several children who were playing soccer on the ground. When Greg Gingrich took his daughter to the Grand Canyon in 1992, he thought it would be hilarious to pretend that he was falling. So he climbed over the barrier and windmilled his arms before losing his footing, causing him to actually plummet 400 feet to his death while his young daughter watched in horror. In 2012, an Indian nurse who was the caretaker for the Duchess of Cambridge was prank called by an Australian radio station pretending to be the Queen. This led to her revealing confidential information that ended up being broadcast on the radio. 3 days later, the nurse took her own life. Known for his sense of humor, Italian pro soccer player Luciano Riccone took one joke just a little too far in 1977. He decided to fake a robbery at his friend's jewelry shop in Rome, unaware of the fact that the shop was actually robbed just 2 weeks prior and the owner was still paranoid. Luciano ran into the store yelling, "Stop, this is a robbery," while covering his face. Unfortunately, his friend acted quickly and shot Riccone directly in the chest with a shotgun. And the man's final words were, "It's just a joke." In 2010, 55-year-old Greg Flanagan was found dead on the floor inside of his locked hotel room in Texas. There were no signs of a break-in or robbery, as Greg's wallet was still in his back pocket with cash inside. He had suffered no obvious external injuries, but had massive internal damage, including broken ribs, damage to his liver and intestines, and a hole through his heart. Flanagan's death was soon ruled an unsolved homicide, despite coroners having no idea what actually happened to him. After an 8-month investigation, it was revealed that he died from a 1-in-a-million series of events. A drunk guest in the next hotel room accidentally fired a single bullet through the wall while playing with his pistol. While Flanagan was laying down watching Iron Man 2, the bullet hit him directly in the scrotum and continued up through his body and through his heart, likely killing him moments after he stood up and stumbled toward the years ago. 72-year-old Lillian Curtis pulled into a Denny's parking lot in Kentucky when a strong gust of wind suddenly knocked the Denny's sign over. It fell directly onto her car and crushed her, causing her to eventually die from blunt force injuries. In 1989, a Soviet jet fighter pilot mistakenly ejected just after takeoff from Poland. The aircraft continued flying for more than 500 miles on autopilot and ended up all the way in Belgium, only to crash into a house, killing a teenager. Near San Diego in 2022, a man died after crashing his car into a parked vehicle while driving rather slowly. Apparently, the knife he was using to mix protein powder while driving was propelled into his neck by the force of his airbag being deployed. In 2020, a Kansas man died after being shot by his dog in a freak hunting accident. He was sitting in the front seat of his pickup truck when his dog stepped on the trigger of his rifle in the back seat. In 1909, George Spencer Millett died in a freak accident while running away from 6 girls trying to give him kisses on his 15th birthday. He tripped and fell on an ink eraser in his front pocket that stabbed him in the heart. In 2011, a 49-year-old Russian woman had a heart attack and was pronounced dead. A few days later, she woke up at her own wake and was so shocked that she screamed and had another heart attack, this time dying for real. Within seconds of the band Great White taking the stage at the Station Nightclub in 2003, faulty pyrotechnics ignited the flammable acoustic foam that surrounded the stage. Far exceeding the building's capacity, all 462 people quickly flooded the exits as the entire building was rapidly engulfed in flames. But many struggled to find the exits due to the heavy smoke, leading to a pileup at the front entrance that prevented anyone else from escaping. Multiple survivors also claimed that 2 bouncers blocked the stage door as fans attempted to escape the building, telling them that the door was only to be used by the band. In the end, 100 people lost their lives, including Great White's guitarist Ty Longley. One man named Mike Vargas managed to survive for 90 minutes inside the building. He was trampled by a mob trying to escape and only survived because he was insulated by all the bodies burning around him. He walked out with only minor burns but still suffers from severe PTSD. 2012, 16-year-old Kyle Plush was pinned by the backseat of his 2004 minivan while reaching for his tennis gear. He managed to call 911, telling them he was about to die, but the dispatcher couldn't understand him. Within 30 minutes, Kyle died from asphyxia. This horrifying diagram shows how spelunker John Jones was stuck upside down in the Nutty Putty Cave for 27 hours before dying. In 1989, the body of a 26-year-old man was found stuck in a sewer tank at a primary school in Japan. He apparently squeezed through a 14-inch opening to spy on women using the toilet, but got stuck and eventually died from hypothermia. This famous mummy found in Pompeii appeared to be satisfying himself during his final moments in 79 AD. While working his shift shift at an Iowa supermarket, Larry Moncada went missing and wasn't found for 10 years. He'd apparently fallen headfirst into a tight gap between a freezer and a wall, and his screams were most likely drowned out by the sounds of the coolers. In this photo, Japanese student Ayano Tokamasu can be seen gazing at Niagara Falls while standing on the fence. But just moments later, she lost her footing and tragically fell to her death. In 2016, a Chinese man named Jia was trying to take some selfies with a walrus at a zoo in China. But after a few pics, the massive walrus unexpectedly attacked Jia, clamping its jaws onto him and playfully dragging him into its pool. In a heroic attempt to save Jia, an experienced zookeeper tried to intervene, but both were tragically killed by the beast. After suffering from an aortic aneurysm in 1955, Einstein refused surgery, stating that he wanted to end his life gracefully. He was taken to the hospital but refused any further medical intervention. Einstein's last words were unfortunately lost forever since he said them in German, which the nurse treating him did not speak. The photo was taken at a zoo in India just moments before this white tiger dragged this man into his den and mauled him to death. The man apparently climbed up the fence to get a better view of the tiger, but ended up slipping and falling into the cage. Flat earther and daredevil Mike Hughes died in 2020 after crash landing his rocket he made to prove that the Earth is actually flat. In 2011, 3 teenagers from Utah stood on some train tracks to take a selfie next to a passing train. But they didn't hear the second train coming from the other direction, and all 3 were killed almost instantly. In 2011, a New York man died while riding his motorcycle at a helmet law protest. Medical experts said the only reason he died was because he wasn't wearing a helmet. In 2022, personal trainer Tom Mansfield accidentally overdosed on caffeine. He apparently miscalculated the amount of powder he needed and drank the equivalent of 200 cups of coffee in one. In 1996, a New Orleans man tied a sausage around his leg with a rubber band and wore skinny jeans to appear as though he was packing. While he was having the time of his life at a nightclub, the rubber band caused a blood clot which traveled to his brain and killed him. In 2014, Kentucky pastor Jamie Coots was handling a rattlesnake during a church service when he was suddenly bitten. But instead of going to the hospital, Coots simply went home believing that God would save him. An ambulance was later sent to Jamie's home by concerned churchgoers, but his wife declined medical treatment despite her husband falling unconscious, and the pastor later died. In 2019, a Florida man thought it would be fun to drop large pieces of concrete from an overpass onto a highway below. He found the biggest one he could lift with rebar sticking out of it and dragged it to the edge of the overpass. As he was pushing it over, some rebar caught his pants, pulling him over the edge and right into oncoming traffic.